Smolder is without a doubt one of the best champions we'll ever see for climbing solo queue. We expect that no matter how many nerfs he may receive, that he will always be an extremely strong champion, especially in the lower elo brackets. In this guide, you will find everything you need to get started, ranging from his playstyle, a quick ability breakdown, combos, tips and tricks, how to fight, builds, and much more. Also, we're excited to announce we've done a massive update, adding all brand new courses for Season 14 on our website, skillcap.com. And if that's not enough, we upload 10 new Smurf commentaries every week where a challenger teaches you how to play every champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. The best part? You can try all this out completely risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCap, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted in Season 14. So what type of champion is Smolder? Well, as an ADC, he plays similarly to Ezreal, where you're more of a caster rather than a pure auto attacker. The nice thing is that, unlike Ezreal, you don't need Korean challenger mechanics to pull him off, as Smolder is extremely easy for how effective he is at carrying games. Now, the reason why we mentioned that Smolder is likely to be a powerhouse in low elo is because of his infinite scaling, similar to champions like Veigar or Aurelion Sol. Scaling champions are without a doubt some of the best in lower brackets, and Smolder is looking to be an absurd late game carry. Typically, these scaling champions aren't for everyone. If you think that you'll be sitting in lane AFK trying to farm stacks, don't worry, that's not the case at all. You are more than capable of fighting early on. Sure, you won't be Draven levels of strong, but you're not going to AFK every lane. You can definitely take chances and look for good fights. Not only that, but the stacking process can actually be quite enjoyable. You will be deleting waves quickly while powering up in a very satisfying way, so it won't feel like a chore as it does on other stacking champions. That being said, stacking efficiently every game is without a doubt the most important skill to mastering Smolder. So towards the end of the guide, we'll give you some quick and easy tips to make stacking a breeze every game. For now though, let's break down his abilities. Smolder has a stacking passive. Based on how many stacks he has, his 3 basic abilities will simply deal more damage. Not only that, but his Q will evolve based on his stacks, but we'll get to that. The way you build this up is exactly the same as the way Veigar does it. If you hit an enemy champion with your abilities, you will earn 1 stack, but your primary way of farming should be by last hitting minions with your Q. Why we mentioned that this won't be as annoying as on other champions is that your Q can generate more stacks by killing multiple targets with it. And that brings us to our Q and its evolutions. To start the game, it is a really basic ability. It's point and click damage. At 25 stacks, it will evolve to deal splash damage around the target. This will speed up your stacking significantly. At 125 stacks, you get a pretty big spike. Your Q will now send some extra fireballs behind your target to deal roughly the same damage. Then at 225 stacks, your Q's final evolution occurs. Now hitting a target with it will apply a max HP burn that deals decent damage. Not only that, but if your target drops below this threshold, they instantly die. It's a mini Elder Dragon and it's very, very strong. This is an extremely powerful spike, so you want to get to this point quickly. Moving on to your W, this spell is much simpler. It's just a rolling fireball. It moves fast at first, but then it slows down. It also does a bit of extra splash damage around any target it hits. So hitting people that are clumped up will deal very nice damage. Your E is a very strong repositioning ability. You get a burst of movement speed, and you're also able to fly over terrain. While doing so, you will rain fire down on the lowest health target. For his ultimate, Smolder will roar, calling his mom. It puts an indicator on the ground, showing the direction, then she comes down in a straight line to deal damage. Enemies in the center will take extra damage and be slowed. His mom will also heal Smolder a bit if he's standing in the area. It's fair to say this is a pretty high value spell with a ton of damage and utility. As you can probably tell, his kit is fairly simple, so Smolder doesn't have any complicated combos to learn. Playing him well is more about understanding how to properly use your abilities, but let's cover the couple of simple combos he does have first. You can input buffer both your Q and W to make them come out a bit smoother. So Q flash is a thing, as well as W flash. Unfortunately, you are locked into roaring for your R's animation, so you can't flash to hide the direction like you can on some other champions. We figured we'd mention this so you don't waste your flashes trying to be fancy. The only ability that you really need to think about using is your E. For starters, the movement speed you get is based on your current speed. This means that you ideally want to cast your E while you're sped up by something else. This can be Ghost, or maybe the buff from an enchanter support like Lulu's W, Nami's E, and so on. The second big thing about it is that you can't do anything else while you're flying. If you do, you'll drop down. So a very important thing you need to keep in mind is to press your Q and W before you fly into the air. Take a look at this Smolder duel, for example. The enemy one only uses his W before flying. Our Smolder, on the other hand, uses both of his spells. While in the air, Q comes back off cooldown, giving us 2 rotations of our Q compared to the enemy Smolder who only used 1. Alright, with his super basic combos out of the way, let's talk about some gameplay tips to get the most out of his kit. Smolder has two problems you're going to have to learn to deal with. One is his very short range. To cast Q or auto attack, which are your primary damage spells, you have to be really close to your target. We shouldn't have to tell you why being this close to an enemy is usually not good for you. On top of that are his weird auto lockouts. On a lot of other ADCs, a general gameplay pattern is to weave spells between auto attacks. So for example, on Sivir, you would auto Q auto very smoothly. Smolder, on the other hand, can't auto smoothly after casting his Q or W. Take a look. If you cast Q, notice how long it takes for his auto to go off after. Same thing with his W. It just takes forever for Smolder to auto after casting. However, you can move immediately after these spells. So what you'd ideally do is auto Q kite, then auto W kite or something along those lines. Basically, if you play a lot of other ADCs, you'll want to break the habit of auto attacking after casting a spell. Through our testing, we found that Smolder is far less auto reliant than most other ADCs. Combined with your short range, these auto lockouts do not give you a lot of time to sit there auto attacking targets. Your gameplay pattern is going to be about casting spells and immediately kiting to reposition a lot of the time. This doesn't mean you won't ever auto attack, of course. Autos are a big part of any ADC's damage, but you won't be able to weave in as many as other ADC champions. As you can see though, this isn't that much of a problem because you already deal so much damage. Now let's talk about some ways to deal with your short range. Having the range advantage in League can be pretty oppressive. You get to dictate when fights happen, poke someone from far away, and so on. So as Smolder, you may struggle unless you incorporate these tactics. Remember that at 25 stacks of your passive, your Q will begin dealing splash damage. You achieve this spike very quickly into the laning phase and will be one of your primary ways of trading. So ordinarily, your Q's range is fairly mediocre, but take a look at its max range when you factor in the splash damage. It becomes a very respectable ability when you play around the splash and allows you to control a lot of space in the lane by utilizing minion waves. You need to really play around this. You want to stack your passive by spamming Q on the wave, while also using that splash damage to threaten your opponents. Smolder is quite good at spam shoving waves and applying pressure this way, so make sure you play around the splash as much as possible. At 125 stacks, your range and harass potential becomes even better and follows the same guidelines. Always try to keep a minion between you and your opponent to maximize your range. Your R is also a big tool you want to play around. The problem is that although it's an extremely strong spell, it can be quite easy to miss. So before casting it, make sure that your opponents are out of movement abilities in CC or are stuck next to a wall or something where they can't avoid the damage. You can also look to cast it from Fog of War. Although you might still alert them through a roar, if they can't see the initial direction on the ground, it'll be much harder to know where it's coming from or where you're aiming it. The nice thing about Smolder is that these principles continue to apply throughout the game. Smolder is honestly a pretty easy champion to play as long as you follow these fundamental concepts. In fights, hiding your ult's direction is a great way to catch an enemy team off guard. You also want to continue to take fights around minion waves or jungle camps. Players will definitely underestimate what you can do around waves as the game goes on. Take this Fed Talon for example. Look at how Smolder fishes for Qs again and again through the wave so that he can poke Talon but never be in range to be attacked. Eventually, he deals enough damage to where he can fly in and burn him down with one final Q. Which brings us to one of our most important tips about Smolder, the draft phase. We have really emphasized playing around minion waves so far, and for good reason. Like we said, Smolder's auto and Q range are so small that you will either be outranged or engaged on if you try to fight normally. What this means is that you'd ideally want to avoid drafting Smolder into purely ranged comps. If the enemy team has 4 to 5 ranged champions, you will definitely struggle to play the game. Smolder will be at his best when there are 2 to 3 melee champions on the enemy team that you can bounce Qs off of to hit the enemy back line. As you can see in this example, as Diana chases, Smolder can threaten Ahri with his Q's spread damage. You make it extremely difficult for ranged champions to follow up on their melee frontliners by constantly barraging them with Q's and W. So just keep this in mind as one of the main factors for when you will succeed or have a hard game as Smolder. If you're versus multiple melee champions, you will have much more opportunities and angles to bounce Q's off of to spread fire everywhere. This won't mean that you'll be worthless into comps with range, but it will give you less opportunities to deal damage and you'll have to play around your cooldowns a bit smarter. As for your build, you'll likely be building very similarly to Ezreal as an ADC caster. You'll do this rune page, and for your items, go Essence Reaver, cooldown boots into Navori. There's also the option of going the Trinity Force and Muramana route. From our testing, the crit variation felt a bit better to play, but that might change with item balancing. One thing we want to mention is that Smolder seems very similar to ADCs like Kog'Maw, Vayne, and Varus. ADCs with percentage-based damage can typically build 1 to 2 damage items, and then go into tankier options rather than continuing to build damage. So if you see an enemy team composition that is countered by armor or magic resist, then you can very easily adapt your build to go for much tankier options. With good passive stack farming, your base damage is more than good enough, and you should feel very comfortable giving up some damage for survivability. And that brings us to our final section, where we'll give you some tips for stacking your passive. An extremely important concept to keep in mind on Smolder is that getting ahead will usually mean you stay ahead. The more passive stacks you have early, the more Q evolutions and damage you get. This lets you play more aggressively, farm more waves, look for more trades, and so on. Basically, if you do well early, you'll be able to keep that momentum easily and keep stacking super fast and snowball out of control. On the flip side, if you struggle early on and don't get many passive stacks, then you'll slowly fall behind. You can't farm as many waves, take as many fights, etc. And as a result, you will stack your passive super slowly and not be nearly as effective as you should be. What this means is that super small optimizations can add up a lot, since getting to a Q evolution even just 1 minute faster might be the difference between a won or lost game. First things first, we recommend you run biscuits in your rune page. While you will eventually fix your mana issues, you won't be able to spam spells early on. Having biscuits to replenish your mana when you run out will usually let you spam your Q the entire laning phase without much worry. Having a solid start to your passive stacking is much more easily achieved with biscuits. The second thing to keep in mind is that after 25 stacks, you can obviously start farming multiple minions per with the splash damage. Smolder will be building a sheen item. However, the sheen only amplifies the main target hit, not the splash damage. What this means is that when you're preparing minions to last hit, you always want to prioritize casting Q on the highest health minion in the clump. So for example here, Smolder is preparing this group of 4 minions. The melee is the one with the highest health left, so he uses sheen on it, while the lesser splash damage is enough to get the rest. Next, if you're 1 stack away from evolving your Q, that cast will go off as if you'd already evolved it. So if you're at 24 stacks, you should try to prepare the wave as if you've already got the splash damage. This can get you a couple of extra stacks at your Q's evolution breakpoints. Finally, if you want to use your W to trade, try to throw it through the caster creeps. This basically prepares them instantly to be farmed by your Q and is a nice way to trade and farm at the same time. And remember, if you truly want to improve and rank up fast, head on over to skillcap.com. We just finished a massive update adding all brand new courses for Season 14. We even upload 10 new Smurf commentaries each week where a challenger teaches you how to play every champion in the exact rank you're stuck in. And remember, you can try all this out risk-free. If you don't rank up while actively using SkillCap, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below to get the rank you've always wanted this season. Alright, that should be absolutely everything you need to get started playing Smolder immediately. Good luck, and thanks for watching.